Chapter 107 Rec September 13, 2018 15:47 and 36 seconds 40%. Get that damn camera out of my face. A voice screamed into my ear. All I could think about was the sensation of falling and the sudden realization that I had hit the ground. I was sitting down, but I wasn't out on the asphalt or down in the dirt. I was in the passenger seat of a truck, like a U-Haul truck, and the front of it had gotten messed up. It took me a moment to get my bearings and realize we were tilted, but when I did, I heard the voice again. I said, "Get the camera out of my face." The voice said. I suddenly realized the person was speaking to me, and that I did indeed have a camera in their face. It was a nice camera, portable, high-tech, and strapped to my left hand. The truck driver, an NPC named Earl, was next to me, and he was not pleased. I turned the camera forward so that it wasn't filming him anymore and looked at my situation. Earl had driven the truck down into the pit where the roller rink had once been, and somehow, I had gone with him. Earl was not happy with me, but he was even less happy with himself. "I don't know what just happened," he said. "I didn't mean to do that." "We're all right," I said. "Everything's gonna be fine." I didn't know if that was true, but it felt like the thing to say. I opened my door and crawled out onto the pit's dirt, instinctively filming as I went. Looking back at the way we had come, I could see the clear path where the truck had turned off the road and down into the dirt. Up ahead of us, the front end of the moving truck had hit a dirt embankment, and that had put a stop to us. I backed away, climbing up out of the pit and filming the surroundings as I went. I didn't even notice I was on screen until I was almost out and up onto the road. Earl came after me with his head in his hands, apologies pouring out of his mouth one after another. "I thought I saw a parking lot," he said. I didn't comment on that but tried to reassure him. It wasn't long before an SUV pulled up on the road next to where we had turned off into the pit. Kimberly was driving, and Logan was in the passenger seat. She put it in park, got out, and started asking what was going on. "Is everyone okay? Is anyone hurt?" she asked. I patted myself down and then called out, "I'm fine. How about you, Earl?" He held up a thumbs up, but I could see the worry on his face as he broke into apologies toward Kimberly. "I'm so sorry, Miss Madison. I could have sworn I saw a parking lot. I was going to pull in and wait for you all to catch up." And then he kept apologizing like a man about to lose his job. "Earl, it's all right. Accidents happen," she said as she got closer to us and started visually checking to make sure we weren't injured. Logan was out of the SUV and down into the pit with us soon after Kimberly. He didn't seem as concerned with our health or well-being. "We've been in possession of those artifacts for all of 7 minutes, and we already dropped them in a hole," he said as he started racing down into the pit toward the moving truck. He looked back up at me and said, "Stop filming and go grab the manifest." I went toward the SUV, taking a few moments to look through it. It was filled with small wooden crates, the kind museum exhibits might be contained in. I found the manifest, which listed different artifacts. It wasn't anything fancy, just the kind of stuff you'd expect to see in a jailhouse museum, various paintings related to the history of the place, some personal effects of judges and prisoners known to be connected to the jailhouse, that sort of thing. The manifest also listed the flight all this cargo had just gotten off of. I looked down the road and saw the airstrip. Putting two and two together, I realized our characters must have just picked all of this up. On my way back down into the pit with the manifest, I passed Kimberly, who was comforting Earl. Then, I worked with Logan as we sorted through the crates in the back of the moving truck to make sure nothing was broken. It was only a few minutes after we started that I had the presence of mind to look at the camera. On the red wallpaper was a trop, not a player trop like the items we had recently come across after the tutorial. It was one of those old-fashioned tropes like we'd seen on the Australis Death Machine. The trop was called found footage, and its description was simple: press record to go on screen. Press stop to go off. I thought I'd give it a test. I looked at the panel on the side of the camera, found the button that said stop, and Broken vertical bar stop. Rec September 14th, 2018 9:23 and 15 seconds 100%. We were in one of the jailhouse's offices, which had been completely renovated to look like a modern workspace. One huge section contained a workbench with various crates holding the artifacts we had brought from the airport. That was Logan's space. He stood in front of me, examining an old pair of shackles, or at least that's what he was trying to do. "Can you tell us who you are and what you do?" I asked, holding the camera out toward him. I held it steady using hustle. He kept his eyes on the shackles, moving them around with his gloved hands. Reluctantly, he spoke. "My name is Logan Mays. I am the historian here. I focus on researching and preserving the history of this building and its role in the town's justice system. My specialty is local history, and I work with records and artifacts to make sure the past is documented accurately. That's about it. Can you tell us about what you're working on right now?" I asked. He stared at me blankly for a moment, then said, "This is a pair of shackles. These were alleged to have been stolen from the body of Calvin Monroe after he was hanged in Town Square over 150 years ago. We can't verify that, but I can at least ensure that these are authentic to the era." He turned his eyes back to the shackles and continued examining them carefully. "What do you like most about working here?" I asked. He placed the shackles back down on his workbench, looked at me very seriously, and said, "I appreciate the professional atmosphere that allows me to focus on the tasks I've been assigned. I don't like constantly being pestered for videos on social media." He turned back to the shackles. I continued to record him, and he ignored me. "Just pretend that I'm not here," I said. He looked back up at me and started laughing, the whole thing a joke between us. Broken vertical bar stop. I had some time to figure out how the camera worked. I could take things around me on screen by recording them, but that didn't change the normal way that on-screen and off-screen worked. If Carousel had better ideas about what should be on screen, my camera would stop recording. On the other hand, I found that some scenes simply wouldn't start unless I was recording. This camera wasn't simply a prop. It was fun to fool around with, but it was very clear to me that this whole gimmick was designed as an obstacle. And it would certainly be one. Rec September 14th, 2018 10:12 and 46 seconds 100%. My name is Kimberly Madison. I am the director and acting curator of the Carousel Museum of Crime and Justice, also known as the Carousel Jailhouse Museum. Right now, you're watching as we transform this historical location into an active place of learning. This is the original jailhouse, courthouse, and police station of the town of Carousel and the county seat of Carousel County. A great deal of history happened within these walls. She stared at me, waiting for another question. "Well, not the original jailhouse, police station, or courthouse," I said. Kimberly smiled. "No, not the original, but the jailhouse was built on the exact same cornerstone as the original jailhouse at the Carousel settlement founded in 1718 before the original town was wiped out by the Carousel Valley meteor strike in 1742. So, in some ways, this is the original jailhouse." The history of Carousel was as liquid as a cat lying in a sunny spot. There was an exhibit about the meteor strike. It had destroyed the whole original town of Carousel. The town was refounded 40 years later. Can you talk about the sordid history of crime in Carousel and what someone might be able to learn about it by coming to the museum?" I asked. Kimberly looked past the camera and at me, her displeasure evident in her eyes. "Well, the focus of the Museum of Crime and Justice is on the positive history of the courts and police officers who have kept Carousel citizens safe. But we would be remiss not to include artifacts and historical anecdotes related to Carousel's darker history. After all, many of the most notorious criminals in our history came right through this jailhouse. They used to keep prisoners who were marked for death in the cells beneath us, didn't they?" I asked. "Yes. Pretty much every prisoner who was executed in Carousel had to stay at this jailhouse. I wasn't supposed to emphasize the darker history of Carousel, so Kimberly was eyeing me harshly. "And when was the last time we hanged a prisoner in town square?" I asked. "1978, Kimberly said begrudgingly. "You had better not be getting all joke footage. I really stuck my neck out to get you this job, Riley. Please don't make me regret it." "I won't. I'm getting good footage, too," I said. She stared at me, clearly disbelieving. Broken vertical bar stop. The storyline had been uneventful, and the plot cycle had barely ticked forward since we had begun, but I was learning a lot. The museum was nearly finished, and since this was a time travel storyline, the history of both Carousel, or this version of it, and the jailhouse itself was vital information. Learning from the various exhibits around the jailhouse museum, including those inside the old police station and courthouse, which were all connected, was essential. This was especially true since we had lost our copy of the book containing accounts of all the tragedies that had befallen Carousel. It made sense that our characters wouldn't have it yet, but it certainly got my heart beating fast when we realized it was gone. I had a feeling we would get an opportunity to get another copy the hard way, just as Anna and Camden had. I took the camera around, filming various exhibits while the others continued doing their jobs. Kimberly, Logan, Antoine, and Lila were accounted for. Dinah and Bobby were missing, but that was to be expected of them. Rec September 14, 2018 13:32 and 8 seconds 60%. The only part of the museum currently open to the public was the police station section in the center of the building. Not only were there extensive exhibits, including a weapons exhibit with some familiar artifacts inside, but there was also a station where you could get fingerprinted. A class of children, probably around 4th or 5th grade, was lined up, getting fingerprinted by Lila, who was an assistant of some kind. An NPC police officer stood with her. True to her nature, Lila was a background character, and while she hated being on screen, she didn't seem to mind me filming her. Perhaps it was only the invisible cameras she didn't like. I filmed from the other side of the room. Statistically, 1 in 4 of these children is going to be a murderer, Logan said off to my right, just quietly enough that the camera and I were the only ones that could hear him. This program is going to help us get out in front of their crime wave. I laughed and continued filming as the kids went through the line one at a time, smearing black ink on their fingers and then pressing them onto a piece of paper as instructed. I had done the same thing when I was a child, and yet, watching it happen here in Carousel, it suddenly seemed much more insidious. Lila's just asking for trouble over there, mixing with the criminal element, Logan added with a smirk. They are going to remember her. Lila seemed to hear her name. She looked up and saw me holding the camera. I waved at her, and she reluctantly waved back, managing a smile at the same time. As we did, a splotch of blood appeared on her poster on the red wallpaper. Logan had just sarcastically marked her for first blood. It felt really creepy doing it that way. Obviously, we had come together and decided who was going to die many times, but actively marking a teammate for death felt different. Still, if things went well, she wouldn't actually die this time. Only her character would. Broken vertical bar stop. Rec September 14, 2018 16:03 and 54 seconds 40%. Antoine stood wearing a pair of khakis and a button-up shirt along with a neon orange vest and a hard hat. He was in charge of the renovation. I didn't get a hard hat. They had given one to Kimberly and Logan but not to me. Maybe that was because I would never show up on screen since I was the one holding the camera. Kimberly stood next to Antoine, more or less interviewing him. "So, what are you working on right now?" she asked. "We're preparing the judicial wing of the museum," Antoine said. "Most of these doors have been sealed off, probably to prevent vagrants or vandals from destroying the woodwork and crown molding." I panned up and around, showing off the dusty but beautiful antique wood panels of the original courthouse in Carousel. I was 95% certain this wasn't actually there the last time we were here, but since this entire area had been closed off when we were in the jailhouse last, I had no way of knowing. I put the camera back on Antoine and Kimberly. Have you found any artifacts or antiques during the small demolition? In fact, we have, Ant-Man said. We found all manner of documents. And if you'll look over there, he added, pointing toward a stack of envelopes on the floor near a sealed-up door, the courthouse was receiving mail for decades after it was closed. The mail carrier simply slid it in the mail slot and didn't think anything of it. We'll make sure that gets into the right hands, Kimberly said with a laugh. Suddenly, there was a commotion behind them as one of Ant-Man's workers finally managed to break through some of the boards sealing up a door. They really didn't want anyone getting through there, did they? Logan asked. Hold up, Ant-Man said to his workers as he moved forward to investigate what they had just uncovered. Are those bricks? Logan asked. Ant-Man looked back at us and said, yeah, it looks like they bricked it up. He walked across the room towards some building plans laid out on an old wooden desk. Running his finger across the blueprints, he said, that should just be an alcove or a small closet, from the looks of it. The kind of place you'd hang art. We all looked at each other. Well, they didn't look directly at me, but they did glance at the camera. Why would they seal up an alcove that small? Kimberly asked. One way to find out, Ant-Man said. He turned to his workers and said, carefully break away the brick. And so they did, carefully chiseling out the mortar. When they had a good hold on the bricks, they pulled until the wall fell apart onto a thick drop cloth they had spread out. Dust filled the air, causing everyone to cough and cover their mouths and noses with their shirts. We waited for the dust to settle, and as it did, a ray of light helped us peek into the little alcove. It really was small, the kind of recessed area where a marble bust might be set on top of a column. There wasn't much room for anything else. As Ant-Man shined a flashlight into the dark alcove, we saw only one object. It was a wooden crate, not one of the museum-grade crates we had hauled the antiques in with, but something that seemed hastily fashioned and sealed with an excessive number of nails. Ant-Man and Kimberly looked at each other, confused. Logan, what do you make of this? Kimberly asked. We need to do this the right way. This could be an important historical artifact. Logan moved forward and examined the box. This is not the way they would have stored anything they found important back in those days, he said. I need to get it to my workbench to remove these nails. And so he picked it up, noting that it wasn't particularly heavy. We followed him all the way back to the offices, where his workbench was. He had already finished examining the shackles, so there was space for him to set the box down. I filmed him slowly removing nail after nail until, eventually, he could lift the lid off the crate. What the? He said, peering inside. What is it? Kimberly asked, excited. Logan looked back at me, then at Kimberly, before reaching into the box and withdrawing an object. It's a videotape, he said, holding up a black recording tape for a camcorder. I moved closer, lifting the camera to get a good shot inside the crate. The box was filled with them. I don't understand, Logan said. These are not from the era when the courthouse was sealed up. These are about 8 or 9 decades off the mark. Unable to contain myself, I reached into the crate and grabbed one of the tapes. I read the faded label. Party time was the only thing written, all in lowercase letters. This makes no sense, Logan said. But he wasn't telling the truth. We all knew what was on those tapes. And we would soon have to watch them. Broken vertical bar stop chapter 108 Rec September 21st, 2018 13:08 and 21 seconds 80%. We had been on the storyline for less than 10 hours, but if you believe the clocks, calendars, and the camera I was recording with, it had been over a week. We had barely made any dent in the plot cycle. Carousel was collecting lots and lots of footage, and when I was off screen, I would sometimes take out my headphones and use my quad-on-set ability just to listen around. It was surprisingly comforting to feel tapped into what was going on, even if all I heard was a conversation between Kimberly and Ant-Man or Logan ad-libbing a darkly humorous rant about some serial killer who managed to delay his execution by revealing the locations of his victims gradually. I went through my character's desk, looking for some kind of adapter that would allow me to view the material on the tapes we had found on the wall, but but there was no luck. Kimberly was standing at the entrance of my cubicle, and I was playfully filming her. We hadn't established what our relationship was, but we were friends of some kind. I was a talented but irresponsible freelancer who worked part-time for the museum system of Carousel. It was just what we could concoct with our interactions. As if we had not just planned out our conversation, Kimberly casually asked me in the way a boss might, "Can you catch me up on those tapes we found? Have you been able to decode them?" Decode? Ha! I explained. They are archival quality and in good shape, but they have an outdated format. I don't have any way to read them with my current setup. But I put a call out to Tom Skelton over at the electronics shop. He was able to order the part. He says he'll come in tomorrow afternoon and open up the shop so that I can pick it up. Seemed very eager to help after I name-dropped you. "Oh, well, he's a good friend," Kimberly said. "Clearly," I replied, with as much mischief as I could put into those words. She rolled her eyes. In reality, I had used the internet, which actually existed in the storyline, to look up a local electronics shop. After much mental preparation, I called them, and they said they could get it for me. It was all in a day's work for Riley Lawrence, horror detective. "So you'll have them ready by Monday?" she asked. "I should," I said. "I'm going to try and get a head start on it this weekend. I'll come in Saturday after my gig downtown." "Your gig?" Kimberly asked. "I thought this was your gig." "This is one of my gigs," I said. "Even my main gig, if you will." "What else are you working on?" she asked. "The Carousel Daylight Waltz," I said. "Oh, that's a big deal," she replied. "They needed elite camera work, so obviously, they called in me," I said. "Told me I could name my price." "Obviously," she repeated with another eye roll. "Well, get back to me on those tapes." Broken vertical bar stop. Rec September 22nd, 2018 14:23 and 47 seconds 60%. The Carousel Daylight Waltz was not really a waltz, and though it claimed to be a competition, it wasn't really one. It was more of a talent show with the locals, specifically, the 50 and over crowd. Perhaps that's a little too cynical. The truth was, it was a nice tradition. Men and women dressed their best and brought the person they loved onto a stage at the bottom of a grand outdoor theater near downtown. The theater's seats were long, concrete benches built into the ground, all facing the stage. It was framed as a competition, but it was for charity. Even though it wasn't the type of event I would normally attend or enjoy, it was the kind of event I wished I could enjoy, a tradition, something passed down between generations, a little local flavor. And boy, was it popular. We had a main camera set up to capture the stage. I had a team of 3 NPCs who would do whatever I told them to, although I never let that power get to my head. I focused on getting close-ups of whoever was dancing at the center of the stage at any given moment. The event was lively and filled with energy, both in the crowd and on the stage. The mayor of Carousel was there, but it wasn't the paragon I had met before. It was just a random NPC. He was announcing and speaking as the people on stage danced. From what I could tell, the participants were mostly people from local families in Carousel, older women dancing with their young sons, fathers dancing with daughters, that sort of thing. There were a ton of entrants in the competition, so many that the stage was crowded with dancers, all trying not to bump into each other as they showed off the moves they'd been practicing. They waited for their names to be called so they could waltz into the center of the stage and perform. Kimberly, Logan, and Ant 1 were there somewhere, though they only interacted casually. Each had come with a separate group of NPCs who I supposed were their friends and family, but I couldn't be sure. I was vigilant and panning my camera around the crowd, making sure we captured good shots of people cheering and making their own dance moves as they watched the competition heat up. It wasn't a serious contest, but you wouldn't have known that by listening to the crowd. As much as I liked observing this little slice of wholesome culture, something I realized I hadn't seen in a long time, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach. I filmed as much as I could. Sometimes, my camera would stop recording, But that didn't mean I, Kimberly, or the others would go off screen. No, we were still being filmed by Carousel's invisible eyes, or possibly one of the other cameras I had set up. When I finally regained control of my equipment and was able to start recording again, I made sure to capture a good view of the stage. There were so many dancers on that old wooden stage, too many. Heck, there were at least 100 pounds of sequins alone. As the contestants of all ages danced and swung around to what sounded like the unholy offspring of waltz and polka music, a loud crack echoed through the entire Greek theater. In the blink of an eye, the stage, packed with dancers, seemed to vanish. Gone so fast, I didn't even hear the sound of them falling until they were out of sight. The stage had broken under their weight, and all the dancers, the mayor, everyone on that stage, plunged into the depths below. It was quite a fall. There was an underground complex beneath the stage for the various productions to use. Dust rose into the air as people screamed at what they had just witnessed. Panic set in as the crowd began running and shouting in confusion. All I could do was keep filming. I filmed the stage. I filmed the crowd. I wanted to make sure I captured everything because if this was an important part of the story, we couldn't afford to miss it. My camera stopped working a few minutes after the disaster, and we were no longer on screen. Carousel had gotten its footage. It was a terrible place to be, especially when you knew there was nothing to be done. Amid the chaos, I could have sworn I saw a familiar face, a girl I had grown up with. But I couldn't comment on it. Not yet. Broken vertical bar stop. Rec September 22nd. 2018 22:53 and 13 seconds 100%. I couldn't sleep, I said into the camera. The police called. They said they wanted copies of my footage for their investigation into the collapse of the stage. I just don't want to look at it again, once was enough. Whatever, I sent them the file. No big deal. But then I started looking through these tapes we found in the wall last week. I finally got the converter to hook them up to the computer, so I was looking through them, reading their titles. And I saw something that freaked me out. Here, look at this. I moved the camera over one of the tapes, focusing on its label. Daylight Dance. It read in simple lowercase letters. I turned the camera back to face myself. What are the odds of that? I asked. Broken vertical bar stop. Play December 21st. 1995 5:25 and 30 seconds. I put the tape into the adapter and opened the video program on my character's computer. It was simple and intuitive. I pressed play and started watching the tape. And I watched the whole thing. Talk about déjà vu. What I saw was the exact same dance competition I had just witnessed in real life. At first, I worried I had messed up and was accidentally viewing my own footage from that day. But I wasn't. The footage I was looking at was filmed from a completely different angle, off to the side of the stage. That wasn't where I had been standing. I had a clear, central view of the dance competition. The person who recorded this tape filmed several segments of the dance competition, stopping and starting again a few minutes later. They were closer than me. They could see the stage starting to buckle as the dancing went along. Suddenly, I heard a scream, followed by a crack, as the stage collapsed. Broken vertical bar stop. Rec September 22nd, 2018 23:28 and 7 seconds 100%. I began filming myself again, this time capturing my pure disbelief at what I was seeing. I made sure to record plenty of footage of my reaction. It wasn't like I had any limitation on how much I could film. I started sorting through the other tapes. This isn't possible, I muttered to myself multiple times. Just to be sure, I grabbed another tape titled River Tour and popped it into the adapter. With the camera still rolling, I pressed play. As soon as I did, the camera stopped. Broken vertical bar stop. Play April 2nd, 1996 10:33 and 27 seconds. I watched the screen as someone filmed what appeared to be the Carousel River. They were positioned near a small, one-lane bridge covered in rust. The footage showed several shots of the river until, eventually, A large riverboat began moving down the water toward where the cameraman, whoever they were, was standing. The boat was filled with people wearing cheap orange life vests. They were talking and having fun as a tour guide described things over a speakerphone, though I couldn't quite make out the words. There were families and children on that boat. The boat moved slowly as the passengers looked left and right, admiring the wilderness around them. It was a peaceful afternoon, and I couldn't tell exactly what was about to happen. The boat gently approached the bridge, but before it could pass underneath, an engine roared to life from above. A car driving over the bridge suddenly veered off, crashing through the rusty guardrail and landing directly on top of the boat full of people. I jumped up in shock, genuine shock. I had known something was coming, but the sudden roar of the engine was loud, and the horrifying image of all those people being crushed into the water all at once genuinely startled me. Heart pounding, I pressed the space bar on the computer, pausing the video. Broken vertical bar stop. Rec September 22, 2018 23:52 and 19 seconds 100%. I didn't have to act like I was freaked out. No amount of preparation could help you wrap your mind around videos like this. Somehow, I hadn't seen that coming, but after it happened, a neuron fired in the back of my mind. I realized I was familiar with that particular tragedy. I had read about it in the town of Carousel, horrific events through the ages. But that wasn't the only place I had seen information about this disaster. Grabbing the camera, I practically ran downstairs to the jail cells, skimming through them. They had been set up with basic information about the various larger-than-life criminals who had once inhabited them. It was grim, but it was all in the name of education. Eventually, I found it, a display inside one of the jail cells. This particular cell was quite popular and had several exhibits attached to its metal bars. Rit Mavis had been the one to do it. He had been driving the car. I read through the display, filming it as best I could while narrating. "It is not possible that someone recorded that event on this type of film," I said, zooming in on the dates. "That occurred in the 1960s, long before this technology was developed. They would have had to transfer it over. Possibly for archival purposes." I quickly read through the information about Rit Mavis. Born to raise hell or something like that. He had driven a stolen car off the bridge and onto the boat just because he could. He almost got away with it, too. He was one of the few survivors pulled from the river. They didn't catch him because of police work. They caught him because he tried to do it again not a week later. But that time, he missed. I ran back upstairs, intent on finding every event depicted in those tapes. I had work to do. Broken vertical bar stop chapter 109 Rec September 23, 2018 0:05 and 29 seconds 100%. It occurred to me that, as much of an obstacle as the found footage format could be, it did give me the ability to explicitly state my objectives and thoughts, like a sort of diary. I couldn't waste that opportunity. All I could think about, how the tape of the collapsing stage could have gotten into that box, is if somebody filmed it and then snuck in here and placed it in there with the others for me to find before I got back from the dance. I said in a low whisper, the kind you'd hear on footage of a man wandering through a dark museum in the middle of the night. I continued walking for a little bit. "I sound like a crazy person," I said, "but what other explanation could there be? For a person to do that, they would have to be able to get into the museum. It's not yet open to the public. It certainly wasn't open earlier today. That means that whoever it is." I stopped talking as I heard a noise from further down the hall, on the first floor where the offices were. "There's someone here," I whispered. Slowly, I made my way across the first floor, doing my best to stay out of the way and unseen as I moved toward the offices. I peered into the dark room with all the cubicles. The only light came from my computer monitor, and from the door, I could see a man standing next to my computer, staring at the footage I had left up on the screen. It took me a moment to make out what I was seeing, but on the red wallpaper, I knew immediately who I was dealing with. I reached over and flipped on the light to the room. "What are you doing here?" I asked. The man was startled. He nearly fell back in my chair. It was Bobby. "Security," he said. "I'm the The new security guard. I looked him up and down, and sure enough, he had been randomly cast as a security guard, which, in my book, was a huge win. Sitting next to him obediently, at the ends of their leashes, were Bobby's two big dogs, Shasta and Doughboy. "Oh my God, you nearly gave me a heart attack," I said. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize anyone else was here," Bobby said quickly, standing up and moving toward me. "You're Bobby, right? Bobby Gill? Kimberly told me about you. I just forgot when you were supposed to start. You're Michael's replacement, right?" I asked. Bobby held out his hand, and I shook it. "Yep, Bobby Gill, that's me," he said. "I don't know anything about who I'm replacing. They didn't tell me much." "No?" I asked. "Yeah, Michael was the last guard overseeing the property during the renovation. He was a character." "And what happened to him?" Bobby asked nervously like he was spooked. "Why isn't he working here anymore?" "He missed a teenager, I think," I said, "and it turned out he was building booby traps, which is illegal, but damn if he wasn't a good security guard." I started to laugh, and Bobby nervously copied my laughter. "Are you all right?" I asked. "You seem a little shaken." "Heck, I probably seem the same way to you." "Yeah," Bobby said, looking back at my computer. "I'm sorry," I snooped, "but I saw you had a video queued up and, did you watch it?" I asked. I wasn't sure how to play that interaction. "You didn't watch it, did you?" "I did," Bobby admitted. "I'm not sure what I saw, though." "Is that from a movie?" I moved over to my computer, sat down, and saw that he had been watching the scene of the tour boat getting crushed by a car. If my character didn't know Bobby and was just meeting him, there was no way I would confide the truth in him, so I lied. "Yeah," I said. "Kind of. About 15 years ago, the Historical Society, you've probably had some run-ins with them, decided that we needed to recreate some of the infamous crimes of Carousel. The historical disasters, that kind of thing. And they took it very seriously, hired a horror director and everything. I'm combing through it to decide if any of it should go on display or be used for social media. It's taking me forever." Bobby was either getting really natural at acting or he was genuinely disturbed by the video he had seen because he was looking at my computer monitor like there was a demon on it. "I don't think you should put that on social media," he said. "Me neither," I agreed. After a lull in the conversation, I had put my camera down so it would film out toward the door and pick up Bobby while not showing me. It was a shot I had seen in a lot of movies. You need to get a static shot of a doorway or similar because, before too long, someone is going to walk past, and you won't know about it until you watch the footage later. "Did you hear about what happened downtown?" Bobby asked. "The stage collapsing at the daylight dance." "I did," I said, but didn't go into detail about having filmed it. I didn't want to come across as overly macabre or too desensitized, which I feared would make my character less relatable. Obviously, I had to be a little grim, but not too much. And honestly, I was not sure how to react to it. "Yeah," Bobby said. "I wasn't there myself, but I did help afterward. It was terrible. And just last week, we had that plane crash, right? I was reading about that in the newspaper. The world is crazy." Points scored for Bobby. We planned to try and find as many disasters in recent history as possible. He had gotten a head start. "These things come in threes," I said, and I meant it. When we had gone through the Town of Carousel book, we noted that disasters really did come in threes, usually. I didn't know if that was an important detail or just Carousel's sense of humor. "Well, no offense, but I hope you're wrong about that," Bobby said. "Me too," I said, and then, after an awkward beat, I asked, "What brings you here in the middle of the night? I mean, normally, security guards show up before midnight. You have a key, right?" "Yeah," Bobby said. "I was looking at our security monitors for the museum system, and one of the windows on the backside of this building triggered. It wasn't hooked up to the alarm, so the police weren't called, but somebody was trying to open it. We don't have the security cameras hooked up yet, so we don't know who, but I thought I'd come over here with my hounds just to look around. Some people just can't wait to learn about Carousel's criminal history, I said jokingly. Well, I'll leave you to it. He nodded, still a little freaked out from the video and possibly from the day he had spent cleaning up from that disaster. You never said your name, he said. Riley. Riley Lawrence. Well, it's nice to meet you, Riley, he said as he guided his dogs out the door into another part of the museum. I stood up, making sure that I was in the frame of the camera, picked up the tape that had said Daylight Dance on it, and then looked in the direction Bobby had just gone, attempting to imply to the audience that I suspected him, or at least suggest I suspected something. This whole storyline was going to have pacing issues. That was a common feature of time travel narratives, constantly finding new places and exploring them, often sidelining the main plot. I needed to give us some breathing room before I settled on the conclusion of time travel being involved. It would play better, I felt. We needed to explore the story as if it were a mystery, as if we were dealing with some sort of mundane explanation, like a society of people somehow connected to all these disasters. In order to bolster my credibility, I couldn't jump to the craziest solution, even if it was the correct one. I turned back to the computer and decided to try to watch the rest of the films. Broken vertical bar stop. Lila had equipped Bobby's and that's lunch drop, which extended the breaks between scenes. Once I stopped recording, I was pleasantly surprised to find that nothing was happening on screen. My quiet on-set drop confirmed that, or at least it confirmed that there was no noise happening on screen. Still, I didn't sleep. I wanted to watch all of the films so that when my character watched them on screen, I'd know how to react. Truthfully, these films were quite disturbing. Even though I'd been in Carousel for a year, it was still unsettling to see them presented so casually and voyeuristically. I just wanted to be ready. I watched through the films one at a time, narrowing down which ones I'd show to Kimberly the next day. Bobby came back into the office with his dogs and sat with me. We watched the films together and discussed our plans for how to unveil them. Anna should be showing up soon, right? Bobby asked. She's the main character, I said. The plot cycle isn't going to move forward until she finds us, not too much, at least. But when that happens, this is going to transition from a strange, vaguely supernatural mystery to a time travel mind freak situation. Bobby nodded. This is going to be one of the harder storylines, he said. I don't get it. My last storyline had a serial killer in it and it didn't freak me out this much. And he buried people alive. Oops, sorry, that's spoilers. I kind of figured from the poster, I said. The groundskeeper poster consisted of a recently dug up plot of land shaped like the kind a grave digger would make. The dirt had flowers planted in a neat little zigzag pattern, meant to look like a heartbeat monitor line from above. Yeah, Bobby said. But all these people dying at once, it's hard to remember that it's just a game. It's hard to remember this isn't really happening. It was happening. It had happened before, maybe even in real life somewhere, and it would happen again, most likely. But I wasn't going to say that. However Bobby managed to cope, I wasn't going to ruin it for him. And he was right. What I had witnessed that day was truly one of the most stressful and terrifying moments of my life, and I had died some gruesome deaths. It just felt raw. It felt wrong. The people on screen were acting like normal, real people you'd find in your town, not like the exaggerated, cartoonish characters from scary movies. Horror movies were supposed to be a funhouse version of real life and real horror, but what we had just seen felt too real. All the tapes we had just watched were viscerally jarring. We witnessed everything from intentional mass murder to hot air balloons falling out of the sky because a bird collided with them, ripping a hole in the balloon. Unlike in horror movies, our voyeur never cut away from the gruesome parts. He just kept filming, and only cut away long after I couldn't stand to watch anymore. Rec September 23, 2018 9:18 and 30 seconds 80%. This had better be good, Kimberly said as she walked into the office the next morning. You called me on the one day I can actually sleep in. What, does your church start late or something? I asked sarcastically. Oh hush. Just tell me what you found, Kimberly said. You're going to want to sit down for this, I said. I filmed her as I played through the video of the car crashing into the tour boat. She jumped back in shock as the roar of the engine broke through the peaceful tranquility, shattering the moment and destroying those innocent people. What is this? Kimberly asked. When did this? Is this a movie? I looked it up, I said. This event actually happened. And the guy who was driving the car was incarcerated in this very jailhouse before getting executed. This is a real event? She asked. Did he get someone to film him do it? He must have, I said. And then someone transferred it onto a tape format that was invented 30 years later. Kimberly sat back in her chair. We're going to have to bring Logan in on this. Maybe he knows something about it. He's studied Carousel's criminal history. I nodded. How many of these tapes are there? She asked. 50 or so, I said. 50? She asked. And they all have this type of, yes, I said. So far. I had seen them, but my character had not yet. She was silent, clearly trying to process what we were supposed to do next. Do we ever get a look at the person filming? She asked. Do they ever speak into the camera? Do we know anything about them? I shook my head. Not that I saw, I said. But I did notice some strange things. Like, watch this, broken vertical bar stop. Play August 4th, 1995 10:26 and 37 seconds. I clicked on one of the videos I had already uploaded onto the computer. The tape had been titled Kiddie Ride, a title that terrified me to my core. I braced myself to watch, but luckily, it wasn't what it sounded like. The video began with a carnival ride appearing on the screen, a tilt-a-whirl type attraction with individual cars. Each car had a wheel in the center that riders could spin to make their car rotate faster. Footage from around the area showed what looked like a lively event. Then, the ride started to malfunction. The sound of grinding metal filled the air, and it seemed as if the entire structure was on the verge of coming apart, putting everyone on board in serious danger. The ride operator frantically tried to regain control of the machine. When he finally pressed the emergency brake, something inside the machinery gave way. There was a loud, gut-wrenching crack, as if the very inner workings of the machine had exploded. The riders, thankfully, were safe. The video then shifted to chaos, people running away, screaming, most of them not even sure what they were running from. They must have thought a bomb had gone off. A group of terrified individuals fled down an alley near a downtown building adjacent to the malfunctioning ride. Their fear and desperation were palpable as they pushed against each other in their attempt to escape. The alley narrowed, and the rush of people intensified. What followed was one of the most agonizing displays of crowd crush I had ever seen. I had seen videos of this sort of thing before on the internet, but nothing could prepare me for this. People were trapped, their limbs tangled and wrapped around each other, crushed beneath the weight of the bodies piling up. Those at the back of the crowd, desperate to move forward, only worsened the situation, compacting the mass of people even further. I hit the space bar. Broken vertical bar stop. Rec September 23, 2018 9:21 and 15 seconds 80%. I looked back at Kimberly and pointed at the screen. Before I could get any words out, I saw that she looked mortified, covering her mouth, on the verge of tears. I reached out and put my hand on her shoulder. I'm sorry you had to see that, I said. But this girl, I pointed back to the monitor, this girl right here with the ponytail and brunette hair, standing next to the dude with his Hawaiian shirt unbuttoned? That girl appears in other videos. Both of them do, but mostly her. Kimberly looked at me, her expression projecting that her character wouldn't understand the significance of what I was saying. This accident, I continued, was a real-life accident. It happened during the Carousel summer days in 1996. We don't even have that carnival anymore, we renamed it to something else and changed the date. What other videos was she in? Kimberly asked. I showed her some other videos, but I never turned my camera off. Kimberly's reaction would be more impactful than actually showing the next video. It was called Teenage Angst. Disturbing sounds of people choking and calling for their mothers filled the air. Tears rolled down Kimberly's face as she watched the video. "Is this real?" she asked. "Did this really happen?" "Yes," I said. "About 10 years ago." I hit the pause bar on the video and pointed. "This young woman and her friend, right there, you see? They are wearing the exact same clothes. And she hasn't aged a day." Kimberly looked at me, confused. "See?" I said. "These were clearly all filmed within the same time frame. And this background actress was at both shoots." Oh, thank goodness," Kimberly said, exhaling in relief. "I thought we stumbled upon a bunch of snuff films." "That's what I thought, too," I said. I was about to be on the phone with B. Kimberly found a tissue and started wiping the tears from her eyes, laughing as she did. "Why didn't you tell me that earlier?" she asked, hitting my arm playfully. "I'm a videographer," I said with a shrug. "It's all about presentation. But, I still haven't explained some others too." At the moment, Logan walked through the door. We spent some time going back over things with him so his character would be up to speed. Whether or not Carousel would use the footage wasn't clear. "What was it you were saying wasn't explained?" Kimberly asked, after Logan had a similar reaction of relief upon realizing the videos must be fake, because the same woman with the same clothes appeared in multiple videos. "Here's where it gets a little weird," I said. I started playing Daylight Dance. They watched intently, but a look of confusion spread across both of their faces as they realized. "Is this yesterday's dance competition?" Logan asked. "Yes," I said. "Why are you showing us this?" Kimberly asked. "This was on one of the tapes in the box," I said. "What?" Kimberly asked, her eyes wide. "I know it doesn't make any sense," I said. "Whoever shot this film must have snuck into the museum and put the tape in the box so that I would see it." They both looked at me like I was insane. "Wait," I said. "Look at this." I switched the video over to the footage that I had shot myself at the tragically fated dance. "This is the footage I shot," I said. "You see where I am, up at the top?" They nodded. "Now look at this," I said, letting the camera pan over the audience after the disaster. I hit the space bar. "What the heck?" Kimberly said. "That can't be her," Logan said. "It sure looks like her," I said. "And she's wearing the exact same clothes. And it had been captured on film at all 3 disasters, spanning 30 years. That's not possible. Is this a prank? Are you pranking us?" Logan asked, turning to Kimberly. "Is he pranking us?" "This is not a prank," I said. "But check this out." I rewound the film to just before the disaster and zoomed in as much as the computer would allow. The image didn't get any clearer, but it did get bigger. "You see that guy holding a camera?" I asked, pointing to a man wearing a trench coat and a fedora. "I think that's the guy filming this footage," I said, holding up the tape we had found in the box. "Look at him." Logan shook his head. "No," he said. "When we unpacked this, I made a list of every object in the box." He walked across the room to his desk and came back with a piece of paper. "What did you say the title of that tape was?" Logan asked. "Daylight Dance," I said. He ran his finger down the paper. No. I wrote this a week ago. There must be a mistake. You must be messing with us." He turned the page around, showing me that Daylight Dance was already on the list. That could only mean one thing: no one had snuck in and placed the tape in the box. It had been there before the dance even happened. The 3 of us looked at each other, unsure where to go next with the conversation. To save us the trouble, I reached over to the camera and shut it off. Broken vertical bar stop chapter 110 Rec September 23, 2018 14:02 and 35 seconds 80%. Kimberly was slumped over in her chair, leaning against one of the desks in clear distress, drinking a glass of wine unashamed. "We're off the clock," she had said earlier. Logan was examining the outsides of the tapes on his workstation. I sat just out of the camera's range. We were having a quiet moment. All that could be heard was the construction going on a few rooms down. Antoine appeared in the doorway with an unapologetic look on his face and asked, "Are we disturbing you?" "You're fine," Kimberly said softly. "It's just, we tried to get this done on the weekends so that we wouldn't bother you," he added. "I know," Kimberly said, looking back up at him. "You didn't do anything wrong. We didn't realize that we would be in this weekend." Antoine broke his gaze away from Kimberly and looked around the room until his eyes landed on the wooden crate that had contained the videotapes. His eyes perked up. "Did you manage to play those tapes?" he asked. "Not that it's any of my business. It's just a really strange find, and I once found over 100 Barbies behind a sheet of drywall." He was being funny. He had not yet seen the tapes. He didn't have to act worried or confused. Kimberly glanced at me and then at Logan before saying, They aren't anything important." "Well, that's too bad," Antoine said. "I was sure we'd stumbled on some lost history." Logan let loose a restrained chuckle. Antoine, sensing the tension in the room, said, "Well, I'll get back to work." "Sorry for interrupting things. Wait," he said, doubling back. "Did you guys hear about the stage collapse yesterday?" We all nodded. "I talked to some of my work contacts. The stage was rotten. Somehow, it has passed inspections for the last decade. Somebody's getting fired." "Heads will roll," Logan said. "Well, anyway," Antoine said and then left. "So it wasn't sabotaged," I said. "For whatever that's worth." Kimberly waved him goodbye. After a moment of silence, she asked, "What are we going to do?" "Whatever you tell us to, boss," I said. She glared at me and then sipped her wine. "Well, my first instinct would be to go to the police," Logan said. "Actually, my first instinct is to confirm and authenticate the find so I can take credit, but my second instinct is to go to the police. Of course, when the police got the tapes, they would need to call in an expert on Carousel's history to authenticate them, and I'm who they would call. So it's all the same to me." "We go to the police and say what?" Kimberly asked. "We found some disturbing tapes that appear to be historical snuff films or reenactments of snuff films, and we, the brains over at the Museum of Crime, cannot figure out which. We are going to look like fools. We have to know more about these before we say anything." "The old tapes are one thing," Logan said, "but if we show them the tape from yesterday's accident and say we found it behind a brick wall a week ago, what are they going to make of that? Of course, we could just throw that one in the trash." "I have an idea," I said. "Do you have a real idea, or is it a joke?" Kimberly asked. "I'll wait to answer that question until we see if it works," I said. "What?" she asked at the end of her emotional rope. "Well, from what I can tell, all of these films were shot in Carousel, and they deal with Carousel's history. Maybe we could find a person that we recognize from town, and then we can just ask them about it. If they participated in a reenactment, they could tell us." Kimberly sat up straight. "That could work," she said. Logan walked over toward where Kimberly and I were sitting, clearly interested in my idea. "Have you recognized anyone from these videos yet?" he asked. "The ones I've seen that happened recently," I said. "I did recognize the people, like the daylight dance video." "Speaking of, how recent are these videos? Is there a pattern or a cutoff date?" he asked. "Seems completely random to me," I said. He furrowed his brow. "I'm running out of reasonable theories very quickly," he said. "The only one that still makes sense is that you're faking this." "I hear you," I said. "I'm in the same boat, but I have one fewer theory to work with because I know I didn't do it. Off the top of my head, I did find one video that I think is pretty recent because the cars look modern, but I can't find any reference to the accident on the internet." "Show it to me," Logan said. I fiddled through a list of tapes I had loaded onto the computer until I found the one labeled Afternoon Nap. Broken vertical bar stop. Play January 12, 1996 16:58 and 2 seconds. The film started eerily silent as the cameraman walked through a dark hallway in what looked like a factory. No one was speaking, but machinery was running in the background. The camera panned around a room at the end of the hallway, which contained a machine I had seen before in movies and on TV, but I didn't know its name. Logan recognized it, too, because he whispered, "Textiles." As soon as he did, I realized he was right. This was some sort of textile factory. While the room was larger than the hallway, it was still a very enclosed space, and the windows were very high, with grass poking up into view. The room was underground. As the camera was moved around, I could see lots of desks crammed into the space with sewing machines on them. Most of the desks did not have people sitting at them, but 3 of them did. The people at the desks were leaning over and not moving, almost like they were taking a nap. One of their sewing machines was still on because the worker had kept her foot on the pedal beneath the desk. The camera panned around some more and revealed another worker lying out on the ground. "Okay, pause it," Logan said. I immediately hit the space bar. Broken vertical bar stop. Rec September 23, 2018 14:15 and 6 seconds 80%. Logan pointed at the screen. "See that against the wall?" he asked. I squinted. "Yes," Kimberly said. "It's a calendar." We had a good view of the calendar, except a fan was blowing near it, flipping the bottom half upward and obscuring the month and year. All we could see was the top half, which featured a picture, a photograph of a beautiful house. Moving the video forward or backward didn't reveal the bottom half. I zoomed in as much as the program would allow, but it wasn't like magic television zooming. The blurriness just became bigger, but I could make it out. Raker Realty, I read from the top left of the calendar. "This is one of those advertisement calendars that gets sent out every year," I said. "So if we can figure out what year and what month had that picture, we should be able to figure out the date of this video," Logan said. "It's that easy," I said sarcastically. "It's better than nothing." "When you said that you searched to find an incident like this one, what did you search for?" Logan asked. I could see why Logan was the highest level player on his team. Beneath his veneer of apathy and cynicism, there was a part of this game that he definitely liked. "Carbon monoxide poisoning at a factory in Carousel," I said. He tapped his fingers against the desk. "Maybe we need to expand our search a bit," he said. "We don't know for sure it was carbon monoxide poisoning." "Well, you look it up." "I've been looking up terrible, depressing things ever since I watched the first tape," I said. He didn't argue. He just went back to his computer to do research. But before he could make any progress, Kimberly had an idea of her own. I knew she did because she started putting her hair up in a ponytail to transfer some points from Moxie to Savvy. "You know, they hand those calendars out every year. They mail them to everyone," she said. "Yeah," I responded. "Well, this place has been getting mail for decades." Logan and I looked at her and then at each other. We walked out toward the side of the museum devoted to the historic courthouse. The pile of mail was not so neatly stacked in a corner. While there was a lot of it, it was easy enough to separate something the size of a calendar from something the size of normal mail. Kimberly and Logan did most of the sorting while I filmed and occasionally panned around the room just to make sure the audience got a good idea of the physical space, and to make it look like I was busy so I didn't have to sort through the mail. "I got one," Kimberly said, holding up a calendar that was sealed closed and clearly bent as someone had pushed it through the mail slot. "What year?" I asked. 2018, she said. "This year." We immediately rushed back to the computer as she opened the calendar and started flipping through it, looking for the month with the right picture at the top. She flipped, and I carefully got footage of her doing it while maintaining a shot in the distance of my computer screen, which was still paused at the image of the calendar in the factory. She flipped it one final time and revealed a matching picture. I focused the camera down on the date. September 2018. I carefully readjusted the focus so that it would show the calendar on the screen, demonstrating the comparison. The calendar in the factory was flipped to September 2018. I got a quick shot of Logan and Kimberly acting slightly slack-jawed at the revelation. I'm going to go look it up. You must have missed it somehow, Logan said as he went over to his workstation. I leaned over, getting a good shot of Kimberly as I said, I didn't miss anything. Broken vertical bar stop. Rec September 23, 2018 18:04 and 33 seconds 80%. Kimberly and I continued watching the rest of the video, which cut around, showing at least one additional deceased person before showing the police arriving and conducting an investigation from a hiding spot across the street. There were no signs or markings in the footage to indicate the name of the factory. Why does it have that date? Kimberly asked, pointing to the date on the screen from the footage. Is that an error in your program or? I think the camera being used to film this thinks that it was 1996, I said. I filmed her face as she looked at me, her expression suggesting she was coming to the same conclusion that my character had reached, the one Logan was still resisting. The camera used by the bad guy had been hauled through time. Or it just hadn't been set to the right date. Either way. Did you find anything? I asked Logan from across the room. Nothing yet, he said. Then he turned around and added, how many carbon monoxide-like deaths of that magnitude could there have been this month? At this point, the most logical explanation is that these are reenactments of some kind, except for... He paused. That wasn't a logical explanation, or at least not a complete one. He was playing the skeptic as well as could be expected in this short time frame. Antwan popped in again, comically frustrated that we had not yet woven his character into the main storyline. I'm sending my guys home, he said. I've got to stick around and do some insurance paperwork if that's okay. I smiled at him deviously, knowing I was off camera. He held a straight face as Kimberly replied, that's fine. Do whatever you need to do. The truth was that Antwan, Lila, and Bobby were all just waiting to be incorporated into the story. Dinah was somewhere else, doing her own thing. Broken vertical bar stop. Rec September 23, 2018 19:13 and 38 seconds 60%. Bobby's turn was next. He showed up with his two dogs and was soon in the office with us again. Oh, you got another one of those reenactments, huh? He asked as he saw my computer screen and paused on a shot of some police cruisers. Reenactments? Logan asked. Yes, the reenactments of Carousel's historical crimes and tragedies. You remember them, I said. Oh, yes. You're still watching those, huh? Logan asked. The rest of us have to work for a living. Well, it looks like they're going to have the closed-circuit security system up and running within the next few days, Bobby said. That's great news, Kimberly responded, though her character's heart clearly wasn't in it. After all this idle conversation, we were not even halfway into the party phase. Bobby left to go on patrol, Logan returned to his workstation, and I continued playing the video. I shot a quick clip of myself just to remind the audience what I looked like, in case they needed to remember it when it was my time to be in front of the camera for an important reason. The footage at the factory was almost over when I noticed something I thought was worth documenting. It looks like the same guy, I said. Check this out. Kimberly walked over to me and looked over my shoulder. Our mystery man was standing next to a building right before he stopped filming. He walked by a window, and in that window, we finally got a good look at our antagonist. He just looked like a normal guy. He had an expressionless face, the kind that could blend into any crowd. His clothing was a little worse for wear, but it would take a few moments to notice that if you were passing him on the street. I couldn't see his eyes very well because of the shadow cast by his brim hat. Still, I knew it was an important shot for the movie, so I angled the camera to get a perfect view of him. Loud barking sounded from the entrance to the room. Both of Bobby's dogs were going crazy, pulling on him toward the computer and barking at the man on the monitor. I'm sorry. They are not usually like this, Bobby said. Hush. He commanded. The dogs stopped pulling and barking, but their rapt attention remained on the man pictured in the reflection of the window. Gee, that was strange, Bobby said. The commotion brought Antwan back into the group. Now, all of us were together except for Lila and Dinah. We were just in time to hear glass break down the hall. Kimberly looked back at the screen, and I made sure to show the audience what she was looking at before she turned to me. We were all silent. It took Bobby a moment to remember that he should be the one to check on it instead of Antoine. "I'll go look into that," he said. He and his dogs immediately left the office area and headed down the hall toward the historic courthouse. I followed closely, getting a good shot for the audience. The others trailed behind me as we made our way down the hall. When Bobby opened the door to the courthouse, his dogs began barking hysterically again, pulling him further inside. I ran behind him, trying my best to keep a steady shot, anxious to see what was on the other side of the doors. I entered as soon as I could without destroying the tension we were building for the audience. Bobby's dogs continued to bark but didn't attack. Bobby had a gun trained on someone standing near a far window that had been opened partially and then apparently broken. Standing with her arms raised was Anna. She was dirty, scared, and on the verge of tears. In one hand, she held a book, one that I recognized, The Town of Carousel, Horrific Events Through the Ages. In the other hand, she held a newspaper. "Please," she begged. "I didn't mean to get you all involved in this. Please don't hurt me." Bobby's dogs sniffed in her direction, then stopped barking and calmed down as if intuiting her better nature. Following their lead, Bobby holstered his gun. "Put your hands behind your back," Bobby said. "I'm not here to hurt you or do anything wrong, I promise. I'm trying to save you," she said. "Ma'am," Bobby repeated, "this is government property, and you are not permitted to be Wait." Kimberly cried out from behind me. She moved forward until she was in frame. "That's the girl in the footage." "Holy hell," I said aloud, as if just recognizing her. "I may have overdone it." "Please, I didn't mean to bring you into this," Anna said, holding the newspaper forward. "You have to listen to me. If you don't, you're all going to die." Broken vertical bar stop. Anna Reed is the final girl. Her aspect is girl next door. Girl next door, the girl next door is genuine and relatable, making her the emotional anchor of any group. High moxie reflects emotional strength and the ability to connect with others, while grit showcases resilience, enabling perseverance through challenges and the protection of loved ones. Though unassuming, tenacity and emotional intelligence reveal unexpected solutions in the narrative. Anna has a plot armor score of 21, metal of 4, moxie of 4, hustle of 4, savvy of 3, and grit of 6. Free background trop. Current trop limit, 8. Last one alive prevents death until the rest of the party is killed. Who's with me? Buffs allies during the finale. Let's not fight Buffs allies when she defuses in fighting. A kind face makes NPCs more likely to reveal important plot information. Shared experience allows players to gain loot based on her efforts. Stick to the plan salvages seemingly failed plans through a powerful rallying speech. Borrowed from Riley, the Heart allows the user to end the game when they are the last one alive and participate in her own rescue. Buffs those who protect her. Chapter 111. Anna was sitting in a chair, crying, her hand held out in front of her like she was getting a manicure, but she wasn't. Bobby was inspecting her injuries. Kimberly was by her side as Bobby took off the makeshift bandage she had fashioned. The reveal was stomach-churning. She was missing the pinky and ring finger of her left hand. Even with all of her grit, she was in pain. "Bobby, get that thing wrapped up now!" Kimberly screamed. "I'm going as fast as I can," he said, rushed, nervous. We were off-screen. We had been off-screen for a few minutes. That was not going to work. I hated myself for thinking it. I looked at Anna's fragile, pained expression, her tears, and the blood soaked into her clothes. "I'm bringing us on screen," I said. "Everyone stay in character." I brought up my camera and pointed it at Anna. Then, I moved to the side to get a better angle so that Kimberly would share the screen better. "Don't you dare," Kimberly screamed. "She's in shock." I started to lower the camera, but the sight of Anna's injury reminded me of the stakes. We needed to show the audience that we cared about her and that we were the type of people to help in a crisis. Anna was the main character, and the more we could convince the audience that we cared for her, the more likely we were to succeed. We couldn't skip over this vital character moment. I felt inhuman. I didn't blame Kimberly for wanting me to buzz off. Normally, we could just blame Carousel for pressing record and bringing us on screen at the worst times. Having to do it myself, having to exploit Anna's injury, felt awful. But it had to be done. Establish that we care about her. In character in 5, 4, 3, 2, I said aloud. Rec September 23, 2018 19:47 and 3 seconds 40%. Everything is going to be okay, Kimberly cooed in Anna's ear as she stroked her forehead. Anna was not moving. She wasn't dying. She was doing her best to stay calm. The tears rolled down her cheeks. Kimberly glared into the camera. "Do you have to do that right now?" she yelled. I took a step back and then focused the camera on Bobby. Antoine was handing him some gauze from a medkit. Bobby took it and began wrapping Anna's hand. "This injury is substantial," he said. "We need to get you to a hospital. I can't treat you. My background is in animal medicine. I can patch up the wound for now." "Boo, no!" Anna screamed. I didn't think she would speak. I just hoped she was ready. "Not a hospital. Not a hospital. They keep records for years. They'll report it. No hospital." "Come here," Kimberly said. "It's going to be okay. No one is going to do anything. Is there a man after you now? A boyfriend?" Anna looked at her, too afraid to say. "A stalker?" Kimberly asked. "Is it a stalker?" Anna didn't answer directly. She stared forward, her pain disappearing because of Bobby's healing, but to my eye, it looked like she was lost in a memory. Broken vertical bar stop. That would work. Stopping on a suggestion that seemed to trigger some response from her. That would be enough. "Good thinking with the boyfriend stalker thing," I said. Kimberly helped Anna to her feet and wrapped an arm around her. "Come on," she said. "The showers are this way." They walked past me and headed toward the employee bathrooms. I was left with Logan, Bobby, and Antoine. We just stared at each other. "We needed that shot," I said. "It'll matter." "I know," Antoine said. Kimberly was just lost in the moment. He started cleaning up the soiled bandage that Anna had come with. Logan, who had stayed out of the shot, was holding the book Anna had brought with her. It was the same Carousel Tragedies book I was familiar with. He had it opened and said, September 29th. That's when the carbon monoxide accident happens. He shut the book and carried it with him back toward the offices. Bobby stared at me. "How'd I do?" he asked. "You did great, Bobby," I said. "You did great." Anna was talking about hospital records. "This guy tracks you down from any record, I guess. He has unlimited time." Bobby bent down and grabbed the newspaper Anna was holding in her other hand. "That's unfortunate," he said, as he stared at it. He turned it around. "Crime Museum Unearths Gruesome Discovery" was the front page story. It was the paper from 2 days in the future. "Guess he knows we're here with the tapes," Bobby said. "But the headline hasn't changed." "Could be it won't change until it is too late for the headline to come true, like in Back to the Future," I said. "Or future artifacts are just objects." "They don't change at all," he said. I nodded. "Guess we'll see." Anna had appeared outside the museum minutes before she broke in. Antoine found her while he was waiting for us. When he came in to talk to us, he signaled she was here. It turned out that time had been different for her. Out of mercy or in an effort to preserve production value, Carousel had taken Anna off the board after the dance disaster. She wasn't wandering around in pain for half a day. Antoine only had a few moments to prep her for her introductory scene. She had performed admirably. I had pictured the moment we saw Anna and Camden again as being triumphant and cathartic. These were my childhood friends. Anna had lived next to my grandparents and me, and Camden had spent nearly every weekend at my house during middle school so that he could get away from babysitting his siblings. It didn't just feel like we were rescuing people, it felt like we were also rescuing my happiest memories. My innocence, in a way. But as I looked at Anna, and she was crying, all I could think was that there were still so many ways we could screw it up. This was not a victory. It was a tease. We had not saved her yet. But we would. The downside of Anna participating in her own rescue was that she didn't get a break. To her, she had literally just fought for her life across multiple different interactions with a savage serial killer. When she finally got to a place where she was safe, or at least safe-ish, she wept for half an hour. They were tears of joy, but they still felt so painful to watch. Bobby's healing trop, if you can't see it, it won't bleed, was going to be a real lifesaver. It doesn't even hurt, Anna remarked. I knew eventually it would start again, but the instant pain relief was wonderful, as I recalled. The museum had showers and even a locker room that was originally for police officers but now was used by museum staff. Kimberly had brought clothes she had purchased just for the occasion, something she thought Anna would like. We camped out in the office again, like we had on the night when we were making the jailhouse our base, but the atmosphere was different. It was all for show, all to help Anna adapt, calm down, and get ready. I knew this part was important. I understood that, but what I really wanted, the only thing I thought I could do to help, was to ask Anna about the lore of the story. The sooner we could determine what type of time travel we were dealing with, the better I could adapt our plan. But I knew it was too early to ask. We had time. "Where's Dinah?" Anna asked, after all the casual conversation we could shove her into. "Is she okay?" "Not sure yet," Ant-Man said. "But we have a lot of letters from her stacked up in the courthouse area. Gotta read them sometime." Dinah had brought her trop that allowed her to send us letters and receive letters from a mysterious helper. Off-screen, Ant-Man had pointed out to us that she had sent us about 20 letters. That was just more homework for us. Luckily, we did have time because of Bobby's and that's lunch trop Lila had equipped. We could all see that we had 15 hours before we had to go on screen at all. It was a glorious break. For everyone but me. For me, it didn't seem like long enough. They talked a lot about our time in Carousel since Anna had been gone. It was so strange that when we talked about our experiences, they almost sounded fun, like adventures. That was because no one brought up the bad parts. We had talked to ghosts, in fact, many of us had been ghosts. We got to meet Benny the Haunted Scarecrow the early years, and we fought werewolves. Ant-One was a werewolf. We had been to outer space. Ant-One went on a whole speech about it. I didn't remember him being that poetic about it. "It's so quiet up there. You wouldn't believe it," he said, swirling, sipping his drink. "Not like here, where there's always something buzzing. Up there, it's just nothing. And a view. Looking at the cosmos, it's beautiful, sure, but it's also kind of terrifying. Like, you realize how small you are, but also how much you're part of something way bigger. Hard to explain. Oh, and the food? Total garbage, but I guess that's not why you go. The wildlife will kill you, though," I said. We all laughed. The way Ant-Man talked about the itch storyline made it sound like the most remarkable and magnificent moment of his life, being out among the stars, the infinite potential, the meaninglessness of all of our tiny problems. It wasn't until the end that Anna asked, "So what was the enemy?" Because he hadn't even mentioned the bed bugs or the ibex. Yeah, it was true. If you didn't talk about the bad parts, Carousel could seem like a wonderful world. I wanted to keep my game face on, to keep thinking, plotting, and planning because that had always been my way to contribute. It had always been the way that we found victory. But with Anna there, we couldn't help but celebrate. Anna was not ready to celebrate, not really, but she was too nice to spoil the mood. It felt like we were at one of those parties during the Cold War, where everyone nervously talked about how the bomb could be dropped any minute. We sipped alcohol so that we had something to do with our mouths rather than speak, and we laughed nervously at jokes. We tried so hard to make everything normal. Just an office slumber party. You know how normal people have those. Kimberly and Anna were best friends, and they had their own way of speaking. Unlike me, Kimberly was always ready to play the role she was given, especially the ones that hit close to home. So even though I knew she didn't feel like lighting up the room, she did. She did it for Anna. Anna was the main character, and we needed her mentally ready. That was going to be rough. What was the last storyline Anna had run? The Subject of Inquiry. That was probably the first storyline where we actually took our roles seriously. But even then, it was so long ago, and we'd had so much practice since then. Asking her to step up to the plate and take the lead felt so unfair. While she and Kimberly talked, I felt myself overcome with the stress of it all. We had put so much work into planning and preparation that I could almost avoid the reality of our situation altogether. I could avoid the feelings of fear and the certainty of my death. Seeing Anna, cut, bruised, maimed, and terrified, truly terrified, brought it all back. I left the office and went down the hall to a small area that was supposed to be a break room but hadn't yet been finished. One thing it did have was vending machines, one for drinks, one for food. I found myself lost in thought as I gazed at the options of what to get. Many of these brands were familiar to me from my time in Carousel. E-Cola was a favorite at Dyer's Lodge, and Lemon Lye was Antoine's favorite. I found myself mindlessly pressing the buttons to no avail as I thought about this storyline and everything that we had to do. It works better when you put money in it, Anna said from behind me. I turned to look at her and mustered the best smile I could, given the circumstances. The question I was mulling over was whether we should tell her how hard this was going to be. She looked at our levels and all our fancy new tropes and thought we were basically superheroes. Should I have told her how big of a risk we took to come get her and Camden? Not really, I said. This is actually here because of Isaac's writ of habitation. Isaac is a comedian, you'll meet him later. A writ of habitation is, oh, never mind. The point is, sometimes you get free food at your base. At Kimberly's loft, we get saltine crackers and people's leftover food from the restaurant downstairs. I held up my fingers as if I were holding something between my thumb and index finger, but I wasn't. I moved my fingers up toward the coin slot of the vending machine and pretended to slide in a coin. Suddenly, a sharp clink and metallic chatter could be heard as if I had just dropped a coin in. I pressed the button for E-Cola, and one popped down into the bay below. I started to laugh, partially because of how silly I was explaining this at a time like this and partially because it was such a silly thing to begin with. She laughed, too. I just wanted to thank you, she said, giving me a quick hug. They say that you're a big part of this whole rescue operation. You don't have to say thanks until we actually have you rescued, I said, hugging her back. I didn't feel like I deserved any positive feedback yet. I can say thanks whenever I want, she said. I guess so. I stood there awkwardly because when I didn't know what to say, I usually said nothing. We're going to win, she said. I can feel it. Our fearless leader. I much preferred it from her than when Antoine was doing his hyper-positivity thing. I'll hold you to it, I said. Would you like a lemon lye soda? Or maybe a Mountain Drizzle Blood Red? I think I'll take a gray water, she said, walking over to the machine next to me and miming putting in a coin and hitting the button. Gray water was a brand of drinking water in Carousel. So Camden is, I said, broaching the topic no one wanted to talk about. She nodded. I saw some stuff through one of my tropes, I said. Was it as bad as it looked? She looked distant. I imagined it was worse. We can still save him, she said firmly. That's all that matters. He saw it all happening. Talked about it step by step. From the moment we found the atlas he knew everything that would happen until this moment. Planned it all out. I thought he was just coping. Maybe he didn't plan everything, I said. No one had seen the fake tutorial thing. That was out of left field. More than you might think, she said. Yeah. He said there was a way to save a lot of time researching the storyline, she said. Thought you might want to know. "And what way is that?" I asked. "We go and get him," she said. It turned out that great minds did think alike. We walked back to the office, reminiscing about Camp Dyer. /Tobe continued. Thanks for listening.